Joining us now on Setting the Pace, he is the beat writer for the Indiana Pacers for the Indy Star, and he has just survived the Beehive. It is Dustin Dopirak. Dustin, how you doing, my man?
Doing fantastic, Alex. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. I'm a little bit jealous. You just went to a Beyonce concert, and I was not a part of that. So I just got to ask, how was the concert? And how has this downtime been with no Pacers basketball?
It's been nice, and it was a lot of fun. though. My wife got tickets, and for way more reasonably priced than I was expecting, and didn't know if I was gonna be able to pull it off. She was going one way or the other, but obviously the schedule break worked in such a way that was like, you might as well. It was nice. We went up with, met a couple friends of ours, that my wife went to college with, and it was a great, cool experience. Totally. I mean, culturally, it's nuts. Like, obviously, like, I'm trying to even, how do we even put it in perspective? Like, there's so much going on at this show. Like, it's like I'm used to rock shows where it's like, they come out, they rip for an hour, like they don't have video boards behind them. They just drop a flag behind, the drums and everything like that, and go play for an hour and 20 minutes, play 20-ish songs, something like that, and they're done. I mean, we're talking giant video board. Like, this was at Soldier Field. It probably is like 30 yards long and 50 feet high. I mean, and it's just there's practically movies in between. Like, they have it set out in acts like in a play. And it's like sort of 5 or 6 songs at a time, but it's like just all of this sort of cultural stuff, all of this old, just old footage of her, old footage of other singers. I mean, obviously, on the new Cowboy Carter album is the song Blackbird by Paul McCartney, that was written at first about, black artists in the 60s, black female artists in the 60s, and the importance of the civil rights movement and all those kinds of stuff. So much of the show is sort of dedicated towards them. And you see the kind of cultural history and the richness of that, and that's kind of brought back at every level, and that's kind of what Cowboy Carter is about, is kind of reaching back to some of that stuff, and it tells a whole story. It's just like one of those things. I mean, it was spellbinding. Again, like, I'm not a guy who has like all of Beyonce's records or anything like that. Like, I mean, I know the hits and everything like that, but there's a lot of depth there, and it was a pretty moving experience, I would say. Again, someone I would not call myself a fan. I'd call myself an appreciator. I'm not qualified to be in the Beehive. I don't check any of the boxes that would be required to be a part of that. But it was still like one of those, like, if you it's cinema, it's theater, it's like, and just her, like, if you took all of that away and just watched her as a like, by herself, if she was just dancing and singing by herself, she is a marvel in and of herself. Like, just incredible vocal talent, incredible dancing talent. Brought the kids out. Like, that was a cool scene. Blue Ivy is there, and she's amazing. And I guess Remy, I think Arumi is the second, the younger daughter, and they're, it by themselves, if you took away everything else that goes on, it's pretty amazing. But everything else that goes on behind it is pretty amazing. It again, for someone who's used to, like, just stripped down rock shows, it was definitely a different experience.
Awesome. Well, you might not qualify for the Beehive, but it sounds like you're definitely building a resume. You're
I don't know about that. Yeah.
now, we'll see what happens.
I will spread the word, though. I think of this and see if that gets me a couple of Beehive points.
Hey, the word has been spread, but one thing that it's been a while since we've seen the Pacers. So you tell me, during this time off, we've all done fun stuff. Maybe we've had some downtime, but is it too much rest for this team? Where does it go between playing your best basketball and riding that wave of momentum, to potentially, now you've been off for about a week? Where's that line you want to tiptoe? Where could they have more time to prepare for the Knicks, or maybe is it too much time off?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're just doing the best they can with it. I mean, I think Rick, I asked Rick about it the first day, on Friday, about, like, what are you doing? And there's an awareness, I think, that you have this, but, you got to remember, everybody had a week off between, basically between the end of the regular season and the first playoff games, first full playoff games, obviously, unless you were part of the play-in round. Almost everybody had to kind of, build up from that. And obviously the Knicks have had less time off. And I mean, there's something to be said for it, but you also can't time it. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, if when you have an opportunity to put a team away, you have to put a team away. You can't risk the opportunity of, yeah, maybe we'd rather play 6 to get to the next one so that we're still, in rhythm. It's like, no, especially with a team like Cleveland, you can't not take the opportunity. So once you get past it, you just have to deal with whatever it is you best you can. And, I think they probably came down with a pretty smart approach, which was 2 days completely off, 2 days on, a day off, 2 days back on, and then you travel. I mean, I think that's probably the best way to, kind of piece, I think, all of those together and make the most of it. Make sure you're getting rhythm in. I think Thursday they had a pro day that was sort of a, come in, lift, basically, make sure you're getting your blood pumping and all that kind of thing. Don't spend too much time, off your feet, but don't, go at it full tilt one day. Just make sure you're getting shots up, you're doing something, but you're not wearing yourself out. I mean, I think the other piece is it goes to what I think is just the theory of the case for the Pacers is that they ultimately are the team that can run you ragged, and that is their theory of the case. That is why they're here more than I think any other reason. If you ask the Cavs, like what could you not handle? What was it about the Pacers that is the reason you're done in 5? And it's because they exhaust you, and they just never stop, and they just keep coming. And no lead is safe, and you feel tired at the end of it, and they feel less tired. And so there was something to be said for getting rest. I mean, I thought at the end of the regular season, you started to see them gas themselves, and I thought they needed those 5 days. Thought they needed all of them, and they came back rested and ready to bust everybody else up. It's like, again, I think they're as well conditioned as anybody in the league. Obviously, the Knicks are really well conditioned. The guys who play are, but I think the Pacers just as a whole unit are really, really well conditioned, and I don't think they'll lose that. They'll still be able to, I think, run teams ragged. I mean, like, rhythm might be an issue, shooting could be an issue, but I think they've shown the capacity that even if they have a terrible first quarter when they can't make a shot to save themselves, they still have the possibility of just outrunning you until they get enough turnovers, or they get enough points in the paint, or they get enough fast break points or whatever to break you down.
It feels like the two words I've heard the most with this series, when I've heard different people talking about it, is pace and depth. And we know the Knicks like to play a short rotation. We know the Pacers like to play super fast, like to go 10-man deep. And surprisingly, they played 11 players at one point in one first quarter of a game. So, Rick Carlisle is not afraid to go out there and play his depth. But when you look at this Knicks team that is pretty top-heavy in terms of their talent, that they're used to playing 40-plus minutes, is there any concern about the Pacers maybe going too deep with their rotation where that could hurt them when you're going out there with a all-bench unit versus a Knicks team that could have 3 starters on the floor?
Yeah, I mean, it is definition of clash of theories here. It is believing in two. It's basically like, what do you believe in more? And you at this point they're both pot committed, so they really can't sort of change. And it's just sort of like, let's put these two ideas against each other and see what wins out. Like the Pacers can't be the Knicks can't be the Pacers at this point. They're sort of pot committed to being who they are. As far as at least that piece of it is concerned, to either relying on a lot of bodies or relying on few. The Knicks aren't going to decide suddenly that they have an 11-man rotation. Like there are, I joked about it on Twitter. There are guys I'm not sure Tibbs knows is on the team. Like, I mean, like, it's just, he can only dig so much. Like, that guy, get out here, I guess, if you have to. I'd rather not, but fine. But I think, it's just a question of, can the guys that you have pushed all year to play 40 minutes a game all year sustain guys that have been going in and out and keeping themselves fresh, but also pressing and running the way that they do? Or is there a chance that the Knicks are so well conditioned because their minutes are so high that they cannot be worn down? That's kind of really what the question is. And so, yeah, certainly, there's a possibility if the Knicks can hang the entire way, there are going to be minutes where you're throwing out, like a phenomenal 5-man lineup against, some bench guys. Basically, I don't imagine. I imagine Rick will try to line up his subs for at least having Miles McBride out there, at least having one guy off. But I ultimately think that's why they won last year's series. I ultimately think they did wear them down, last year, and that's why they were able to get him in Game 7. That they were still in a condition that they could put together an absurd shooting performance, and the Knicks had kind of worn down. I mean, like, obviously part of that involves an injury in OG Anunoby, and then another one in Jaylen Brunson. But there was some wear and tear involved there. Anunoby really got pushed for 2 games, and then they had to push the rest of them, and Brunson and Hart and all those guys, were playing absurd minutes and had to take on even more once Anunoby went down. And I think there was some level of just exhaustion that took hold. And you could have that. I mean, again, are there going to be some minutes where you're looking out at a Knicks lineup and you're saying, man, I'd really rather not have Ben Shippert on the floor here, for sure. There definitely will have those moments, or rather not have Jarris Walker there, or, Ben Mathurin's not taking on this assignment of, Brunson or whoever it might be as well as you'd like. All those things are possible. But I think, again, if you're Rick Carlisle, you're ultimately banking on that there's a payoff. And he's found that to be the case. I mean, obviously, you go back, there were some Bucks games. Certainly, I think I want to say Cavs game 2 in particular was the one game where everybody lost their minds when he put out that, all sub lineup in the last 5 or 6 minutes of the third quarter, and then went all starters, for most of the fourth, or, basically went top 6 guys, didn't go anybody that was below Mathurin. And you saw that pay off. I mean, I think Carlisle's going to be committed to this. And so, I would say, just again, everybody hold steady, don't freak out. It's either going to work or it's not. It's basically that's the way they're committed to doing this thing. That's going to be their edge, is to use a lot of bodies to try to wear the Knicks down. There are probably going to be some moments where you don't like it, but you're banking on the 7-game payoff. And so either it's going to happen or it isn't. But I think it is.
Andrew Nembhard has grown so much as a defender this year. I mean, he's been one of those guys that has even taken his game to the next level offensively.
Sure.
Last year in the playoffs against Brunson, he did struggle, and Brunson was shooting about 60% from the field against Nembhard before Rick made the switch to go with Nesmith on Brunson. Seemed to kind of save the series.
Sure did.
Do you think that Rick goes back to Nesmith on Brunson, or says, hey, you know what? I want to give Nembhard another shot given how well he's defended in these first 2 rounds and all year?
I imagine he'll start Nembhard on him because he's put Nembhard on the top guys all the way through. I still think there's, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like, I don't know if Nesmith's just still missing a step laterally. For all Nesmith has done, and Nesmith has been tremendous in these playoffs, so nobody get me wrong here. As far as just individually shutting someone down, I don't feel like we've seen as much of that as we saw last year. You certainly still can see him continue to be the guy who is willing to take punishment. And I think that's kind of the remarkable thing about Nesmith. The thing that stands out to most is he's the guy who's willing to stand in the way of the freight train, even if it knocks him clean. On the floor, he's willing to do that and get up again. That I think is kind of one of his superpowers. I don't know that you've seen him one of those defensive, sort of lockdown performances the way you've seen a couple of those, from Nembhard really throughout the year. So I think he still trusts those more. Obviously, you saw Nesmith take Mitchell, but only in cases when Nembhard was not on the floor. Basically, if Nembhard was on the floor against Mitchell, he was taking that assignment. So I'm going to say he puts Nembhard on him until he proves he can't guard him. That's kind of my view is that and obviously it could happen. You never know. I thought Nembhard was pretty good. He had some really good moments against Mitchell. He had some moments, but there were some moments where it seemed like nobody could stop Mitchell and it didn't really matter. But also at the end of the day, the math was such that they could let Mitchell go get 40 and still beat him, for the most part. So I'll be interested to see what the line of, okay, we can't do this anymore is for Nembhard, but I do think he's a better defender than he was, last year. I think he's taken a leap. He's never not been good. As long as he has been in the NBA, he has been he's been a plus defender. But he's becoming a great one. I think you'll see Carlisle stick with him until he feels like he has to make a move. I think that's kind of my view as to how it'll work. I think that way it makes sense all the way down the line. You can put Nesmith on somebody like Bridges or Hart, and I think that makes more sense right now. Probably Bridges, I would say. I imagine it'll be Nesmith on Bridges, Pascal on Anunoby, and Nembhard on Brunson to start this thing, and then as it changes is how it changes.
Yeah, and I think part of the Nembhard discussion too is that was his first playoff experience last year. It was only his second year in the league too, so
sure,
no reason to over exaggerate what happened. It's a good learning process. It's a good learning experience for him, and he's been really good so far this year. He's just changed their team completely when he came back healthy in December. So we'll see how that all works out, and it's nice to have 2 options, and
sure.
I think just to kind of piggyback off that conversation of who guards Brunson, let's just say both Nembhard and Nesmith get in foul trouble early on, because we know Brunson's very good at drawing fouls and getting the officials to kind of give him some beneficiary calls, that might not be great foul calls. But who do you think is the third best option there to guard Brunson at times?
I would see, because he did pretty well against them last year, I think you test McConnell. and you find out how far McConnell can go on that, because I think he did a good job last year. I remember it was a deal after, I think it was game 2, that McConnell had done a pretty good job, and McConnell had like played like 12 minutes a row or something like that. But like they, because he had done so well, they kept showing, him on the bench, not coming in or whatever in the last quarter. And it was like, well, TJ never comes in those cases, but it was still like kind of it was a bit of a narrative for a little while of, should Rick have brought TJ McConnell back in, or should he kept him out there to stick on him? And as much as it was, again, goes against the rotation, goes against the just typical way they were performing there. McConnell did a good enough job, and Nembhard was struggling enough that it was like, well, shouldn't that have been what was stuck with? So I mean, I think he did good enough that you have to at least try it. That would be kind of the next move. And then but I think Ben Mathurin's had a really good defensive playoffs. I mean, he hasn't done everything right. Like there have been things that have been ragged. There have been periods where, I mean, his 3-point numbers have to be pretty rough. There's been he's hit a handful of big ones, or really, I guess, less than a handful of big ones, but a couple. But from a scoring standpoint, he's been very up and down. But I think every assignment when they've really asked him to go jam somebody, he's done a pretty good job. And so I'd be interested to see what that looks like. Obviously, Mathurin, certainly a guy that you could see Brunson baiting into fouls pretty quickly and pretty easily. But you get a few minutes on him, that sort of thing. Just go make him work for a little while until you pick up one or two. Wouldn't be the worst thing. Again, I absolutely do. I see Ben biting on that shot fake. Oh yeah, no doubt about it. But I do think he could at least push him, make him work a little bit, and just maintain a solid level of physicality if it came down to it.
I thought it was good points on Mathurin. I think he did have some big offensive games. I think he could probably have a more consistent series. Obviously, we know he got ejected early on, took himself out of the game, but became less of a story because Indiana ends up, having an unbelievable win, up 41 points at halftime. However, Pascal Siakam is someone that started off the series really quiet against Cleveland. It kind of ramped up as it finished, but it didn't feel like vintage Siakam. Sure. Do you think that maybe that's going to be something that Indiana wants to emphasize early on, is getting Siakam going in games 1 and 2, maybe even somewhat similar to how he was last year against Milwaukee, where he had the first 2 games of the series was like 35 points or more?
Yeah, I mean, well, I really think a big part of it was matchup based against Cleveland, because I think it was the big, like when Cleveland kind of started off in man really that first game, and he's being guarded by the DPOY. And then Mobley gets hurt, and it's Dean Wade. And Dean Wade's a really good defender. Dean Wade is a solid rock. Like he doesn't do what Mobley does, where fly out of the sky and, pin Haliburton's floater off the top of the backboard or anything like that. But, Dean Wade is like, drive a Dean Wade and he's not moving. Like, that is a solid rock of a human. And so I think a big piece of it was identifying where else you can go. And I think what got him going I think what got him going in game 4 was after, they just got flummoxed by that 3-2, they figured out, okay, how do you attack it? And what they really did was just try to get somebody isolated in the back half of it, either Pascal or Obi or Miles, on one of the smaller bodies. I mean, they were using Strus back there, and Garland and stuff like that, trying to hide him. And it was like, just go find who's being hid and attack the smaller body. And it was really easy for them to get Siakam on one of those guys, and he just got rolling. And you saw it really at the end of game 3. I think really the last maybe quarter and a half of game 3, he got some buckets and made his line look better than it was. And so that I think was really identifying a matchup. So I think, it'll be interesting to see how they view it, because I imagine OG is going to get that assignment, and so it's a question of, I think the Pacers have been really good at going and hunting the guy that they can get. Even though they're not a big ISO team, they have been able to do that pretty well when they're going against top defenders, and those guys are pretty devoted to taking somebody out. They tend to be pretty good at figuring out who can't stop them, and that's when you see some big Nembhard games, for one thing. So we'll see what that looks like. Obviously that's the thing about the Knicks, is they have those 3 big wings, long-armed, really good defenders, tough guys that they can put on, that can make it difficult on you. And so whether it's Hart or it's Bridges or it's or it's Anunoby, all 3 of those guys can make your life rough. So we'll see what that looks like, if they can figure out if they can go attack Brunson or not. and see how that might work. So, I mean, you certainly want to get him. You certainly want to get Siakam activated as soon as you can. Like you don't want to leave that alone, but you also don't want to force it if that's the worst matchup. If someone else has a lot of better matchups and you could take advantage, like if they really like Turner to score on Towns, and they want to really exploit that as much as they can, maybe that's a direction that they go more often, and they kind of wait for Siakam to find his moments to try to take OG out of the, like remove OG out of the action. I mean, there could be a bunch of different options that they go to. You want that guy scoring, but like you ultimately, if it means keeping a great defender out of the game, like that might change things as well. So we'll see what direction that ultimately goes.
We talked earlier about how the Pacers might defend New York. How do you think New York defends Indiana? Because I do think this is where the wrinkle could be interesting, just from my perspective. If they do keep Bridges on Haliburton, anytime you try to run a pick and roll with Haliburton and Siakam, that's going to be easy to switch, and you can just throw Bridges onto Siakam. But if they do try to put Brunson on Nembhard, I think that's where the Indiana could really attack that. But if they do, like we saw, I think it was in game 6 and 7, maybe they made that switch where they put him on Nesmith. How does Nesmith get utilized offensively to kind of, let the Pacers hunt Brunson in those situations? So just kind of curious how you think they'll match up against Indiana and how they can attack it.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would think they would put Brunson on Nembhard just because, I mean, I like even though Nesmith isn't a guy that tends to post people up, like that, I feel like the size is just so much there that I would have a hard time imagining they wouldn't put size on him. Like if that they wouldn't pick one of the three. My guess, my top line guess would be, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you're putting Bridges on Haliburton, then you're putting, I think, Hart on Nesmith.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense, and just go like high energy body for high energy body, and see if they might just cancel each other out, entirely. If they go Bridges on Haliburton, if they go Hart on Haliburton, then you put Bridges on Nesmith. That's my thought. I mean, maybe they change things around at some point in time, but I think you put yourself in a position that Nesmith could be a problem for Brunson if you put him on them. And Nesmith is just, by just being him, he's been just fantastically effective at doing what it is he does. He might go post somebody. I don't think he's totally incapable of that. I mean, it's not that I'm sure he doesn't work on a lot of post moves, but if you also don't see him defended by a much smaller guy very often. It does seem like you tend to match energy guy with energy guy, on him, and so I would be surprised if they went Brunson and just created a much smaller matchup.
Dustin, I don't know about you, but me personally, I've always been a dog guy. But it's evident this Pacers team has a cat problem. And Karl-Anthony Towns was really good.
That is the worst.
I went there.
Boo.
Look, Karl-Anthony Towns torched the Pacers. Dropped 40 in the game. I believe had 33 in another game. He was efficient in all three matchups. Does that matchup, Alex? Hey, it was a good one.
That's so bad, dude. I'm so sick of it.
Sorry, it just is.
It's okay. It's okay. I got two kids now. All right.
You're allowed to make dad jokes now. That's true.
I am, and I'm full on board on it. But does it scare you of what Karl-Anthony Towns might be capable of against the Pacers in a 7-game series? Because last year, Hartenstein, good center, no doubt, but more like better on the offensive rebounding, better in the paint, things like that. Well, Karl-Anthony Towns, obviously one of the most gifted big men shooters.
Sure. No, he's been a problem for them going back to when he was in Minnesota. He's almost every time they've seen him, it's been trouble for them to guard him. Big dude. Like he's just, it's a tough matchup for Miles. As good as a defender as Miles is, as good as he is to pin stuff back. It's a much larger body. He can take him outside. I think it's you're trying to, just get. You're trying to get him on the other side. You're presuming that Karl-Anthony Towns is going to score a certain amount of points against you. You're trying to score a certain amount of points against Karl-Anthony Towns, and hope that whether it evens up as for Miles's buckets, probably not. But you're trusting that basically just him not just being that great of a rim protector, is going to sort of help your cause in the long term. Certainly a big body, certainly a guy that can really rebound. But you're hoping that there's opportunity there. But he's just a fantastic scorer as a 5-man. He just really is. He's really good at posting up. He's really good at scoring in the paint. He's really good at hitting outside threes. He's one of the best offensive centers, in the league at this point. So, but what we've seen, obviously, so far in these playoffs is the Pacers can withstand somebody being great. You know, like you can have one guy be fantastic and put together absolute monster numbers, and those guys still be able to survive it. Obviously, Giannis was incredible in round one. Donovan Mitchell was incredible in round two. So if it happens to be Karl-Anthony Towns and that's the guy they don't stop, well, the math still works for them. And obviously, like the difference is you certainly got to worry about Brunson. Brunson's probably going to put up big numbers too. It's just a question of can you put up? Do you have the capacity to put up more than they can? And again, like that. Probably you're going to see bigger individual numbers, for the Knicks than you've seen from anybody else, just because they're going to lean harder on those guys than they have. But I mean, I think you're trying to make them work. You're trying to make them inefficient. Certainly they don't want Towns to score 30 on 15 shots, like that's certainly not what they're trying to do here. But all the same, Karl-Anthony Towns is going to score against the Pacers. I can tell you that now. That's definitely going to be the case. He's going to put some points up, and he's going to have at least one or two nights that you're like, sheesh, he's just working them. But like said the same thing for Giannis in round one. They won in round one. So I said definitely, especially after game one, said the same thing about Donovan Mitchell. They won round two anyway. So I imagine like they're not going to shut Jaylen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns down. We know these guys well enough at this point, but just because they don't doesn't mean they can't win.
Yeah, I mean, even against the Cavs, like while Donovan still had his big numbers, I mean, I felt like Mobley at 24
Mobley
in
had
the
some
final
moments.
game. Like you didn't even really realize he was doing that well. Like it was just like it was so quiet, and he had it on really good efficiency. So we'll see how it all plays out. I mean, obviously it's going to feel bigger just because everything's going to be magnified now. It's Eastern Conference Finals. You're playing against New York. It's just different. But Tyrese Haliburton is playing some good basketball. I would say that we haven't really seen a breakout game from him aside from what we saw in that game 5, and obviously the big game winners when he came back against the Bucks in game 5 as well, and then game 2 against Cleveland. But what do the Pacers need from Tyrese Haliburton in this series to be able to win this in 5, 6, or 7 games?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot, but I mean, he had some really good games in last year's Knicks series. He had some games where he wasn't very good, and so I don't think he has to be fantastic in how. I don't think he has to be great in every single game. I think they can survive if he has another rough one in the middle of there. They are built in such a way that he does not have to be perfect. We've seen that over the course of the last 2 years that you can have a game where you're like, what happened to Ty, and spend 2 days, everybody pulling their hair out and whatnot, and then he comes back and figures it out. I mean, like he obviously needs to have several big games. He needs to have multiple, games where he's at least, he's 15 and 10 minimum, or 18 and 10 or something like that, where he's at or around his average or higher, and he does something special, whether it's big assists, big shot at the end, there has to be periods, obviously, where Haliburton makes a big impact on the series. I think what's just as important, I mean, it's important from a team standpoint that they are prepared for him to get face guarded, and they are prepared for what it takes to pry him loose of that. I think that was something I found interesting. Early, just right after the break, especially they spent time leading into that Memphis game, the first one out of the break, of saying, all right, Jaylen Wells is going to face guard him. Like, what are you going to do about it? How is that going to work? And it really got Miles Turner engaged. It really got Miles setting good, solid, knock you back screens to kind of just pry Jaylen Wells off of him, and create scenarios where, Haliburton was starting his offense maybe further back, maybe closer to the logo, putting himself in a position where kind of Turner could really get in Wells' way, or they could run him off a bunch of screens, or, just kind of go side to side, just getting screens and rescreens, until they got Wells off of him. And I think you're going to have to see a lot of that. You're like, I'm sure Josh Hart and Michael Bridges and OG Anunoby, if and when they're on him, are going to try to face guard him, and you're going to try to take him out of the play and force the Pacers to try to beat them without Haliburton. They can play some 4-on-4, but they can't play a whole game of 4-on-4. They can't play whole games of 4-on-4 basketball where Haliburton is just sort of removed from the action. He has to be aggressive of getting space out of there, but they have to be aggressive. And it doesn't mean he needs so many shots. As far as this is concerned, it's not all about how many shots he gets. That's ultimately a pretty good indicator. But what he really needs to be able to do is just play down in space. You just need to see that he is not being hugged the entire time, and that he's got the ball coming downhill, and even if he doesn't make the pass that's the assist, he can make the hockey assist. Just basically anything that creates downhill motion for him, which ultimately leads to the ball ping-ponging around, is what you need, and that's where they have to go. And, again, that will probably lead to more shots, but the just most important thing is that they are doing things to pry him loose of the face guard that seems to be inevitably coming.
Yeah, I thought the Pacers had many guys step up. Nesmith and Nembhard played just fantastic against Cleveland in the playoffs. They've been awesome, especially from 3-point range. Like I don't know where this was all year for Nembhard, but he's shooting the three ball really well. But is there someone else that can step up for Indiana? Like, do you envision maybe is it some of these guys taking their game to the next level, or is it maybe a player off the bench that we have not talked about too much that you think could still rise to the occasion just a little bit more against the Knicks?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of have an idea now of what their hierarchy is. I think their hierarchy is pretty clear. It's the five guys, and then you have the three. You have, the three bench guys that are always going to play, and that's McConnell, Mathurin, Toppin, and then you have the three bench guys that are sometimes going to play, and that's obviously Bryant, Walker, and Shepherd. And there's kind of mix and match depending on situations, all those kinds of things. So I mean, Obi's going to have a run out dunk at some point in this series, and he's going to do it at the Garden, and it's going to be a big deal. We can set this in stone that we're going to see at least one Obi play where he shows off at the Garden, because that's home and that's where he was, and he still has statements that he'd like to make, and somewhere in there you're going to see some big Obi moments. So I think all three of those guys certainly have potential to give you more. I think you've had some good TJ moments, some not great TJ moments, some fantastic Obi moments, some moments where you didn't really notice Obi, and Mathurin the same. I mean, yes, if you could get one of those guys to have a very consistent series, top to bottom, that would be a big deal. I think you just have to make sure you're getting one of them every night. You're getting double figures from at least one of those three every night. Doesn't have to be the same guy every night, but if you get a sixth scorer in double figures, that gives you a real good chance. If you get at least one of those guys to give, even if it's just 10, 12, 15 is a big deal, any of them. If you can get a 20-point night from Mathurin in there, that's a big deal. Any of that contribution. And I mean, any buckets you get from the other three, you'll take. You don't need a double figure night from any of those three guys. But anything you get, any minutes, if you get 5 good minutes out of Jarris Walker and he slows down Anunoby or gets in Karl-Anthony Towns' way, that's helpful. If Bryant, does something like that, if Bryant gets in there and just doesn't let Mitchell Robinson crash, basically, if he just keeps him off the boards a little bit, on offense, that's a big deal. All of that stuff is helpful. Each of those guys can make a difference. But I do think a big significant key would just be making sure you're getting double figures from one of the three, the three guys of the top half of the second unit, if you will. If one guy in double figures out of those would make, I think, a really big difference.
You brought up Mitchell Robinson, and we haven't really talked about him a whole lot in this series just because he's not part of that starting five. But clearly the Knicks fans and the Knicks have been good with him on the court with his rebounding and rim protection. We saw the Celtics do a hack of Robinson, and I don't think Indiana will do that just because I think it slows down their pace a little too much. But how do you think how do you think Robinson impacts this series?
Yeah. No, I mean, they'll do that if, the math will have to make sense, and by that, I mean, they'll have to be down. They'll have to be down, and they'll have to be in a situation where they feel like that's their best chance to get a stop. They'll have to be down and not defending well, and Rick Carlisle's not above that in some kind of he's not too classy to foul a guy who can't make free throws. Right. He's not going to be but to your point, I mean, first off, it's a great point. That I hadn't even really considered, but it's totally they don't like putting people at the foul line. They're not going to do it on purpose. They put people at the foul line sometimes because they can't stop them. That's not a thing that they like to do. But they, if it makes sense for them, it makes sense for them. And so, but he can rim protect, off the bench. He can really rebound off the bench. They know they're not good at rebounding, and they're just trying to get, all they're trying to do is play teams even on the glass. They know they're not going to win that by a bunch. If they can be anywhere near on second chance points, they're happy. This isn't as good of a rebounding team as it was last year. That's worth noting. They were better when they had Hardenstein on the glass. Last year I think they led the league in offensive rebounding coming in. So you don't expect it to be the same kind of occasional bloodbath as it was on the glass. But Mitchell Robinson is a guy who, can change the dynamic there pretty significantly when he comes off. And both Towns and Robinson obviously can. Robinson could really crash, but again, better than Towns can is he can rim protect. And so it's like you just have to be cognizant of where he is, know when you can drive on him, know when you can't, try to avoid him, try to, and then attack when he's, if you can drag him out, that helps. I mean, I think Haliburton has not gotten better. He's always been good at this, but I think he seems to have been more aggressive the last couple of series of if he can get a 5-man out on the perimeter, and space it out so he gets a chance to really go ISO and blow by somebody, trusting that, that's better. It's like if you can drag him out on a pick and roll and force him into a switch and bring him out to the perimeter so that he's not just standing at the perimeter at the rim waiting to swat you, and then be able to blow by him so you get to have some space to finish. I think he'll look for those opportunities.
We've always dealt with this Pacers team being like they play down in their competition at times, or you don't want to get too cocky, too much confidence. But after you dismantle a 64-win Cavs team, the 1 seed, and you do it in 5 games, do you feel like now you can beat just about anybody? Because you look at this field.
Yeah.
Okay. See, I'm sorry. They're still not scaring me. You had to go to 7 games against Denver. Okay, we'll see what happens with them. The Minnesota Timberwolves. I mean, they're what, a 6 seed this year, and then there's the Knicks. To me, it feels like this is the Pacers' best chance. Do you feel that now maybe they could have that, not to say chip on their shoulder, but like that confidence to just say, why can't we win a championship?
Yeah, no, they're there. They're there as far as having that belief that there's nobody on the board that you look at and say you can't do this. That this is not possible. Certainly playing a team in the Knicks that they've already beaten in a playoffs, even though it's a different team, even though they've added pieces, this is not a team that scares them in a sense of believing that they can't do it. I think you're right with the Thunder in the sense that they have certainly shown vulnerability that they haven't shown before. I think prior to the playoffs, that is a team that, like, if you pulled the Pacers and said who's the best team in the NBA, they would have said the Oklahoma City Thunder. It was. I mean, this is another, like, reason number 10 million why it's a lot of fun to cover Tyrese Haliburton is you can just have conversations with him about other guys, and you like learn so much, and it's fascinating to see what a player of his intellect thinks about these other guys. And so we after they got beat by the Thunder, he hung around for a while, and Joel Lorenzi, former Indy Star intern, now beat writer at the Oklahoman, covering the Thunder, is just a terrific young beat writer. Terrific beat writer in general, and he happens to be young, which makes him just disgustingly good. But Joel and I were just sitting there, just sort of picking Ty's brain, and Joel was kind of trying to get a sense of what everybody else thinks about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and just his team. And Haliburton just did a phenomenal job of breaking them down. He just said something about Shai, which just like he's like everything he does has a purpose. He's like, when you watch every step he takes, like it has a direction. And like Ty was really impressed by that. And so, coming out of there, those guys definitely were like, well, we just play the best team in the league. That's the best team in the league right there. So they certainly have that respect for the Thunder. But I think they also, this goes back to some of the initial discussions, they have a belief in their theory of the case. They have a belief in, they have come to the conclusion of, this is how we win. This is what it's not just that they think they're good. They know what makes them good. They truly believe, they keep saying the term wear down effect because they believe in it. It's come to be the thing that they really trust more than anything else. As much like last year, they really trusted their belief to just score on anybody. Now they still have that, but they believe in their ability to exhaust teams. And they think that is something that is always in their back pocket, no matter how down they are. They believe in their capacity to wear teams out. And I think that makes them feel like they can beat anybody in 7 games. Because they believe, okay, we can lose this one, we can lose that one, we can lose this one, but we're still going to have more in the tank than you will, and you're going to have to kill us, and it's going to be hard. And I think their belief there goes a long way. Again, last year they really believed in their offense, and they knew they weren't great at stopping people, and they were trying to get better, and they were a little bit better. They believed that nobody could stop them from scoring. They truly believe that in their heart of hearts, but they also knew they were vulnerable as far as stopping people. Now, it's not that they think they're the best defense in the world, and it's not even that they think, they probably, if they don't know, they should. They're not as powerful of an offense as they were last year, but I think they believe in the total combination and just what it does to the body. They believe in what they do to another team's body, individually and collectively. And I think that gives them the confidence that they know that, like, if you play them, you're going to feel like you were in a fight, and like, you're going to be exhausted, and that's going to give them an advantage, and they're going to be hard to kill. And like, they don't just think that, they know it. And so that goes a long way. It's not even, they don't have to build up that kind of confidence. Like, they are aware of what they do to teams. Like, it's more fact than it is fiction. I think the way they beat Cleveland also just creates, like, a lot more respect for them, because again, I think it just goes both ways. It's like, they have a formula, they have a system, and that system is exhaustion and persistence. And so, like, that, there is more, the belief really comes from that and goes outward as just knowing you have a theory of the case.
All right, this is my last question here for you, and you might have already kind of touched on it, but just to kind of elaborate a little bit more, maybe. In terms of fill in the blank, I guess you could say, two-part question: the Pacers win this series if what, and the Pacers lose this series if what?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much that. The Pacers win this series if they exhaust the Knicks, and they lose this series if the Knicks don't get exhausted.
Okay.
It's just a question of, if the Knicks can withstand this, they have the better starting five. Their best players are the best players in the series. Well, at the end of the day. But the Pacers have good enough talent that if the wear down effect works, then it has the best chance of working, because they're playing the team that operates the least bit of depth. If Rick Carlisle's belief is that more bodies is better than just conditioning the little living daylights out of 5 bodies, then the Pacers win. And it's my belief that basically, if you can condition 11 guys, that they'll be that they will be eventually able to wear down 5 guys.
What was your prediction for this series, Dustin?
I haven't predicted it yet, but I'm gonna put Pacers in 6.
Likewise, a clean sweep. That's exactly what we're saying. Pacers in 6. It just feels right. Could it go 7? Yeah, it's possible. But the fact that we all feel confident in Pacers in 6 makes us feel like, hey, if it has to come down to 7, we can still get it done. But I think that we're not used to maybe seeing this much confidence across the fan base.
It's gotta be terrifying, right?
Oh, I mean,
you guys have to be a little bit scared, right? That
Yeah.
like it's the most certainly it's the most confident I've seen, and like, I think
not now. When?
Sure. Well,
that's the thing.
I'll say this, and I like, it's a good idea to say they still have these guys for a while.
Yeah. They do.
If it doesn't, like, I mean, I think you guys, it is you guys. Remember, like, I just cover these guys, but if you're a Pacers fan, you should say, like, you should really want this bad, and I'm not, and like, you shouldn't go into this thinking that there are no roadblocks in front of you that are unclearable, and like, but if it doesn't work out this time, like, you're not dead. This is your last chance. There will be, these guys are going to be around. You've got Haliburton, Siakam locked up. I would be, the way it sounds is, I would be surprised if Miles Turner isn't on a deal after this. You still have Aaron Nesmith. You still have Andrew Nembhard for your starting 5. After this summer, you will have them for at least, I think, 3 more years together minimum. Like that's minimum. So I'm not saying don't get excited. I'm not saying don't view this as a big opportunity. But you will have the pieces going forward. This will not be the last chance for the Indiana Pacers.
Well, I know you're not.
Wherever it goes, it will not be the last chance for the Indiana Pacers.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think next year is pretty wide open with Jason Tatum's injury, obviously, and then what happens with Giannis in Milwaukee. There's a lot of question marks here and how the East could look. But I mean,
it's an opportunity, and you're this close. Don't get me wrong. You don't want to pass up. But like, I'm definitely not saying, well, chill out. Like, you're playing with house money or anything like that. But I would say this is a thing that has a chance to have staying power.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I don't think it's just like a 1-month window right here for the Pacers to win a championship. I think there's still an opportunity here with this current landscape of the NBA and how the Pacers are kind of built right now. But, I know you're not a fan of the team, Dustin, but you still want them to do well, because it does good for your stories and things like that. People like a winning team more than they like a losing team. So.
It does move the numbers quite nice.
We see it over here at the podcast.
I'm not complaining. I'm maintaining my objectivity, but yes, is it good for Indy Star business? Yes. Does that make it for Dustin Dopirak? Yeah, it kind of does.
Yeah, so we're all fans, even if we say we're not, just because it's better for us on a content side. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I do appreciate your time and staying up late with us to do this. So appreciate it. Glad you got to have the Beyonce experience in between series. Now you get to travel back and forth from Indy to New York and deal with all of the New York traffic and things like that. So best of luck in terms of your content and all that going out. But anything you want to plug before we let you go?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're throwing all kinds of content out there this week. Obviously, just obviously there's you can take like go down memory lane and see everything we've written since. But I'll have obviously I've done a story just on kind of like who I think has the edge, kind of in various concepts or ideas: offense, defense, depth, bench, coaching, etc. I'll do a position by position deal, and look at point guard, shooting guard, all that kind of thing. And we'll cover the next couple of days of practice. I'm trying to put something together on Rick Carlisle and his sort of evolution in his belief in kind of randomized movement and putting the keys in somebody's hand and letting them drive, which apparently was not kind of his thing before. So stuff like that, and obviously we'll have it from there, and we'll be covering it. We'll definitely have a photographer there out in New York as well. So should be cool. So we'll have a lot of stuff kicking at the Indy Star to come check out.
Awesome. Dustin, we really appreciate you coming on. And hey, we don't want this ride to end at any point, so it might not be the last time we have you on.
Anytime, guys. Absolutely anytime.
All right. Thanks, Dustin. We appreciate it. Joining us now on Setting the Pace. This is my first time conversating with him, but he has had a few podcasts here with Michael J. Facci on the show. It is our good friend Andrew Claudio from Knicks Film School, which I think has one of the best podcast logos in the game right now. So, Andrew, thank you so much, man. How are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Fellas, it is good to be here. Obviously, the circumstances forced us to be a bit combative, but as someone who also has respect for what you guys do, I'm honored to be here to preview this series. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just ask you this. 2 weeks ago, would you have ever envisioned that we would see Hicks versus Knicks once again for the Eastern Conference Finals?
Brother, 2 days ago? Did I think we'd do this?
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago.
No. I'm saying 2 days ago. Did I think we were gonna do this? And that's what the Knicks up 3-1. That's the Knicks up 3-2. The Celtics series was very much a seeing is believing experience where you took it. This is fun. We got our first win against the top 4 team. Great. We beat them in game 1. Wait a minute. We won game 2. Now what's about to happen? Okay, they asserted their dominance in game 3. This is how it's supposed to go. They'll win 4 of the next 5. Oh, we won game 4 and Tatum went down. We lost by 40 in game 5. Maybe this is exactly how the season should end. They're going to blow a 3-1 lead to a team without Tatum. And pretty much since they went up, I want to say like 41 in the third quarter and Mazzulla pulled his starters, that's honestly the moment for me where it started to set in that the Knicks have made it are going to go to the conference finals, will actually like take that next step that they went all in for this offseason. And look, after having as much of a close eye as I could on what was going on with the Pacers and the Cavs series, it was also the realization the Knicks will host the series and get a chance at revenge for this year. So it wasn't 2 weeks ago, it was barely 2 days ago that I started to think that this could possibly happen, man.
But how awesome does it feel like, rivalries felt like a thing of the past with free agency and player movement and the trades that are going around all the time. I mean, look at Cat. Cat was in the Western Conference Finals last year. Now he's in the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, like things like that are just crazy. But Pacers-Knicks is absolutely back. We've seen that it's not going to be 10 years or 20 years again before these teams face off. Here they are again. What does it feel like from your point of view when, Knicks fans, like what's the pulse on that Indiana Pacers team, given how things went last year? Now you got a shot for redemption.
Well, so I think I'm coming to the right place if I bring some LeBron slander here. But with the rise of free agency and player empowerment, which I'm mostly for, to be honest, like decide where you want to work or decide where you want to live. I'm not against that. But what went away was the team fans. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about this a lot lately throughout this playoff run, that like the player fan arguing against the team fan always wins because you can just go to another team and I like that player. So therefore I like that team and their success. Whereas long suffering Knicks fans, and I'll throw Pacers fans into that too, like we've been through it. We've suffered through the hard times, the downs, and with the Knicks, a lot more downs than ups for sure this century. The fact that you get two fan bases that can rekindle a rivalry from the 90s. It's not lost on me. This series will be on TNT, the last ever series on TNT, with Reggie Miller calling the series. I know you guys love it. I will hopefully hate it by the end if it ends a certain way. It's basketball nirvana for for unbiased and impartial basketball fans. They get to relive a rivalry that defined portions of the 1990s, which is part of the NBA golden era. So look, I wouldn't be lying if there wasn't a part of me during the fourth quarter of Game 6 against the Celtics that couldn't fathom, like, man, it's really going to be the Pacers. Like, I've spent most of my life, it's you guys in the Miami Heat that I've had this tension for, and it's really going to be the Pacers again, standing in the way of the Knicks getting to the finals, and it's almost perfect to an extent.
I mean, you're going to complain about Reggie Miller being on the call. I understand, but let's talk about Stephen A. Smith last year, Game 7, how awful that was from ESPN's production. So Pacer fans have been through their fair share of not getting the respect that they deserve, but I felt like Reggie was pretty kind to the Knicks during the Celtics series. I don't know how you felt, but it felt like for the most part, he seemed to be a little bit happier for the Knicks.
So there's two elements there. I don't claim Stephen A. Smith, for one. So any slander you got for him, I co-sign. And as far as this series that the Knicks just played against the Celtics, I got to be honest, we've been doing these playbacks where we watch along, and I usually have the broadcast down. So some of that might be because I don't want to listen to Reggie Miller call a Knicks game. I think if I have to put my game theory hat on and not my Knicks film school hat on and be a bit impartial, less biased here, of course, I think Reggie Miller is good at his job. He's in the position that he's in because he's earned it for sure. And I'm positive that there are Celtics fans, maybe even Pacers fans, that watch the Knicks play against them in either of the last two series, the one that just happened for the Knicks or the one that happened last year. I heard Mike Breen on the call, the voice of the Knicks, and had a similar thought that, he's much more passionate when Jaylen Brunson hits a three than Tyrese Haliburton, or the guy that I'm rooting for. I unfortunately, I cannot give you an unbiased answer when it comes to talking about Reggie Miller. There's just, it's a similar thing with literally anybody on the Miami Heat. There's too much hate in my heart. And as the Emperor said, it flows through me. And unfortunately,
hey, I respect it. But, when you take a look at this Pacers team, chemistry and depth, I think, are two things that are very, very important. You look at the Knicks team, look, they got a lot of talent, max players, all-stars, all NBA guys. You look at this Pacers team, it's the same group that ran it back last year. Right now, they have 5 players in the playoffs, 5 starters, averaging above 14.5 points per game. They have another guy in Benedict Mathurin averaging about 11, and then 2 others averaging 8.5 points per game. So they're deep, and you could see it on the court. They play well together. They enjoy playing together. They enjoy being around each other. It translates. When you look at this team, does it feel like this is a team, not ISO ball, not, hey, if we stop one guy, we could really, shut him down. There isn't like hey, they got Tatum, they got Brown, and then whatever. It's any given night. It could be anybody for Indiana.
Yeah, I'll say this. In a lot of the previews that we've been doing and the film that we've broken down of the Pacers, it's interesting because, just for this playoffs alone, let's just focus on the 2 series the Knicks have already played. It was load up to try and stop Cade Cunningham in the first round, and you're putting Anunoby onto him. If you're switching on, you're hedging and recovering, and you're largely focused on, let's shut this one guy's water off, make it as difficult as you can on him, and the rest should be easy enough for you or accomplish enough. You can accomplish enough by taking that one chess piece off the board, right? With the Celtics, they switched everything. And I know how many threes the Celtics missed, but it was by design that they all came out of isolation. So get Tatum and bait him into, well, you just got Karl-Anthony Towns switched onto you. You could take him and take them out of their game of the heavy ball movement, heavy transition, and the mismatch you had on that first switch takes them out of what made them an unbeatable thing last year. Same thing happened with Jaylen Brown. With the Pacers, they want you to switch and give you the mismatch because they take advantage, especially with Hallie and how good he is in the pick and roll. My goodness, if they dare blitz this team at all this year and make Hallie hit whoever in the short roll, and it's 4-on-3, they're so effective when you look at all the numbers. It's not just about stopping one guy. It's just about stopping an all-out attack that I got to say, throughout trying to predict and analyze how this series is going to go, you mentioned it being a full team. It's a full 10-man rotation that you have to account for all of them potentially contributing. And the Knicks are going to come at you with their best 7 and try to work in the mismatches. You're going to have to try and match an unbearable pace that usually wears you down over the course of 7 games. And yeah, there was a reason that I was like, I want no part of the Pacers in the first round when it looked like it could be the 4-5 or the 3-6 for a while. And here we are 2 rounds later, an impressive beatdown of the Bucks and an even more impressive beatdown of the Cavs. And it's the Pacers again. So yeah, I have a lot of respect for what they've built and how they've built it, and an even greater fascination for how the Knicks are going to try and stop it, let alone defeat it.
Yeah, Indiana's been playing really good basketball really since January 1st, 42-16, record-wise. And obviously the Cavs were not at full strength. They did deal with some injuries there, but the Pacers, they beat them pretty handily. They won in 5 games, and the only game they lost was when the Cavs had their back against the wall and they didn't want to go down 3-0, and I think Indiana was pretty comfortable because they had won 2 games on the road. So I just feel like the Pacers, the only 2 games they've lost have been game 3s when they've been up 2-0. And so I'm kind of curious how it'll be flipped here just against New York. And you brought up the rotation, right? The Knicks are going to play their best 7. And I think that's really interesting because last year we saw the Knicks kind of have to go into their depth a little bit more against the Pacers. And we saw some success from a guy like Alec Burks. Even Precious Achiuwa at times was able to have positive minutes out there. So just curious, with Indiana playing more than likely a 10-man rotation and playing with more pace, and the games being every other day, do you think Thibodeau is going to jump into that rotation a little bit deeper, just knowing the Pacers bench is going to be playing a little bit more, and he feels like he can maybe match up those Cameron Payne minutes, those Precious Achiuwa minutes with the Thomas Bryant, with the T.J. McConnell?
I don't think Precious plays a meaningful minute in this series, first of all. I think if he's playing, it's because either the Knicks inadvertently, like Karl-Anthony Towns, or Mitchell Robinson got into foul trouble, or Carlisle forces their hand with the hack-a-Mitch and makes them take Mitchell Robinson off the floor, and Precious has to play. What he does to their spacing, especially next to Josh Hart, who Tibbs loves to play. Even when he's next to Karl-Anthony Towns, the minutes are manageable against second units, I guess, but it's just not what you went and got Karl-Anthony Towns for. You went out there to get a center that can space the floor, and if you put Precious out there, Cat's never going to be guarded by a center. The campaign thing is interesting because game 1 of the playoffs against the Detroit Pistons, he was instrumental, had a bunch of fourth quarter points during a 21-0 run that erased a 13-point lead and helped the Knicks win game 1 of that series. And when I tell you he has not contributed a single thing since then, it's honestly an understatement because I think he's contributed to the other team more so than the Knicks. And he's a minimum contract. You've already gotten enough from this minimum contract than a lot of other teams in that he helped you win a playoff game. Like, that's already enough. I think they're going 7. I think they're going to give you their best 7. It's why I think it's advantage Indiana that at their pace with their depth, they can build on that. The Knicks do have part of the fabric of their team is that they can they have a lot of guys that are used to this. They've been playing 40 minutes since December. Mikal Bridges hasn't missed a game since high school. Josh Hart is an Iron Man. It's really just Anunoby that I'm worried about, especially, this from last year when he got hurt, that flipped the series, or at least changed the dynamic of the series when the Knicks no longer had him as part of the rotation. Alec Burks was a veteran, and you could count on him to come in after just being dreadful, and then suddenly he shows up in the playoffs and it's okay. You have a history of suddenly getting hot, and we'll ride that for a couple of games. The Knicks don't have that. I don't personally see the guy that's going to come in, even if it's just for depth purposes, that's going to come in and contribute to winning. Maybe if it's just for rest, fine. But they've done a good job. Like nobody's on their injury report, and I just talked about their 7-man rotation. Like I could mention Landry Shamet, who just looked unplayable in the 2 chances that like a couple of defensive rotations already missed in the first 2 games against the Pistons, let alone like not seeing the series against the Celtics. So yeah, I think you're getting 7 guys, which I repeat, I think it's advantage Pacers in that direction, that they can, like, they're not even facing the Cavs anymore, who were patented for playing their best 10 almost to a fault because their best guys weren't always on the floor. Yeah, it's advantage Pacers in that direction.
I can't argue with it. I think it was against Cleveland. We actually saw 10 or 11 Pacers make an appearance in the first quarter. I mean, we will have depth. So this roster, I mean, it's going to surprise you at times, but I think it ended up wearing Cleveland down towards the end. You saw Donovan Mitchell was just gassed, and the Pacers had the energy to be able to complete some of those comebacks. But we saw the Knicks struggle at times against Detroit. I mean, maybe if I think it was Tim Hardaway Jr. gets that foul call on that 3, maybe it's a different series.
Mm-hmm.
Saw the Knicks trail by 20 or more in the first 2 games against Boston and come back. How can the Knicks potentially be beat? What are some of those weaknesses that they've struggled with that maybe Indiana can exploit?
So the way teams have been guarding the Knicks is that they haven't been putting their center on Karl-Anthony Towns. They've been putting their center on Josh Hart, and then they'll put a wing, their biggest wing or their most switchable wing, on Karl-Anthony Towns. And then they just say, Kat, if you want to go take advantage of Tobias Harris or Jason Tatum, fine. You are not going to be able to take advantage of centers. What's fascinating, to me at least, is that the Pacers have guarded him with either Thomas Bryant or Miles Turner all season. And my goodness, of course, I definitely know the advantages that will come if they decide to put Obi Toppin on him at any point. I'm curious coming into the series if we see Siakam or if we see Nesmith start off on Towns and they go center on Josh Hart, because the way teams have been beating the Knicks is forcing them to make a decision about leaving Josh Hart open, because his shooting, not the best 3-point shooter, even more so, not the most willing 3-point shooter. And even when he's hitting his threes. So game 5 against the Celtics, where they got blown out, hit 5 threes, was 5-9 from 3, has made a habit in the first 3 playoffs as a Knick of making teams pay for leaving him open from 3. It still mucks up the spacing for everybody else when Josh Hart is just left open by his defender. And if the whole goal of the possession from the defense, or what the Pacers might try to do, is we're okay if this ends in a Josh Hart jump shot, then that takes the Jaylen Brunson piece off the board, the Anunoby piece off the board, Bridges, Cat, you name it. The Knicks have not played 5 out, even though they got Cat. I don't think they've played it enough. I think it's less than 200 possessions where it's like Deuce McBride in for Josh Hart. They played it for 4 minutes, I believe. They played it for 17 possessions in the postseason so far. It has an offensive rating of 162, so it's clearly an effective thing. But there is this Josh Hart thing. And to be clear, I love Josh Hart. I have one Knicks jersey, and it's Jaylen Brunson. If I could get a second, it is going to be Josh Hart. He is a hero in this city forever. It's not about how he's played. It's how he's used. He's not underperforming. He's overexposed. He's a 30-minute player being played 40 to 42 minutes a game. And in that gap where you could be playing other lineups that might boost your offense a little bit, I worry that Tibbs won't make those decisions that force you to take Josh Hart off the floor, because he, like most coaches, see what Josh Hart does that don't quantify in a box score, and he falls in love with it. Steve Kerr did it during FIBA, which is why the powers that be probably said, we're not giving you Josh Hart for when these games actually matter for the Olympics. I say all of that to say that, like, the way that the Celtics built that lead and the way that the Pistons even were able to muck up the Knicks offense was exactly that. Like, we're just going to ignore this one player, force Cat to be like a switchable wing, and some of his drives can be a little chaotic. What the Pacers, I assume, will do, will press Brunson most of the time up the floor like they did last year in the postseason, make him work just to get the ball at the court. And yeah, like, the way teams beat the Knicks is just kind of constrict what has now become their offensive identity, which is just really impressive shot making. And when not hitting shots, unfortunately, that has spelled disaster I know that's like seems like a simplification of like, oh, teams miss shots, they look bad, but there's no second gear of like, oh, we'll beat you with our defense, then we'll get back into this game with pace or a different way of beating you. No, if they're not hitting shots, it has spelled lights out, especially when it comes to, well, let's put a different lineup out there that might be more successful. And that's what you saw in those first two playoff rounds where they fell down against the Pistons and down against the Celtics. And I'd imagine you might see it at some point against the Pacers as well.
I do want to ask you this because I've heard some people here in Indiana talk about just how the Knicks don't have a lot of ball handlers outside of Jaylen Brunson, who is their next guy. Deuce McBride is probably that guy. And I feel like last year in the series against the Knicks, we saw a lot of Deuce and Jaylen together at times because the Knicks wanted to have more ball handlers out there. So curious your thoughts on how the Knicks attack that 94-foot defense the Pacers throw at Brunson. Obviously, they could get in foul trouble, but if they're able just to play, physical defense without getting into foul trouble for a 7-game series or however long it goes, it could really wear him out. So how do you think that they'll kind of help take some of that pressure off of him in terms of bringing the ball up?
So either Josh Hart will be a partner walking up the court, basically a screen of going up the court, or Cat will set a screen in the backcourt to free Brunson. Josh Hart might also just be the ball handler at times. Mikal Bridges might be the ball handler at times. There's far too many for my liking possessions where the Knicks will get the ball over half court at exactly 16 seconds on the shot clock, and then they have they play a lot of isolation, unfortunately, which, I mean, look, it's effective, especially when it's Jaylen Brunson doing it, but they have a very little time to try and get a shot up. I would assume with the hope is that you're not walking the ball up the court. You're getting your defense is good enough that you're not letting the Pacers press you the way that they like to. But my assumption is it'll be a team effort to help Jaylen get the ball up the court, the way it worked last year. Outside of Game 4 and Game 6.
So I know Knicks fans always love to say, "Hey, look at who wasn't in the series last year." Between OG going down, obviously there was no Julius Randle. Brunson gets hurt later on. The list goes on. One man that wasn't there for the Pacers is Benedict Mathurin. Now, in the regular season this year, Mathurin averaged 25.3 points per game against the Knicks. He had 38 points in a win. Are Knicks fans just completely overlooking Benedict Mathurin, maybe because they don't really watch the Pacers or because he wasn't in last year's series?
So what's the complaint about Knicks fans that we're ignoring Mathurin because 3/5 of our starting lineup wasn't there?
You beat us when we were hurt. You beat us when we were hurt.
You did.
Mathurin, we did. But I have a feeling that I don't even know if some Knicks fans even know who Benedict Mathurin is. He wasn't in that playoff series, but he is someone that torched the Knicks this year in the regular season. And Knicks won that series, 2-1. But I just feel like I'm not sure if they realize that he's a big part of what the Pacers do. And he's someone that had, I think it was like an 18 and a 20-point game or a 20 and 22-point game against Cleveland. Like, this is someone who we count on who was in that series.
So there's elements to this. There's layers to this. So first of all, the Knicks fans you're referring to that don't know who Benedict Mathurin are, it's not me. It's not my people over at Knicks Film School. I can tell you that much. There is a wave of Knicks fans, I think, undervaluing what the Pacers can do, what they've accomplished to this point, how likely it can be that they win this series. I'm sure we'll make predictions at some point in this show, but I'm not of the mind. Like, Knicks in 5 will never come out of my mouth about this series. And I know we got spoiled 2 years ago. We beat the Cavs in 5, and it's just been the hashtag since then, even though they haven't won a 5-game series since then. As far as what Mathurin has done against the Knicks this season, this is the other layer. I take nothing from the first game that they played against each other where Hallie had 1 point because it was the second game of the season.
He was brutal,
I take nothing from the third game that they played against each other because Turner wasn't there and they just cooked Obi Toppin and Thomas Bryant in drives. Like Josh Hart just getting to the rim with whatever he wanted. I believe they had like 50 points in the paint that night, but I recognized the whole roster wasn't there. And then to the next game, I believe it was the second night of a back-to-back, or the Knicks were like on a travel. So I don't take the regular season stock as much to what Mathurin did against the Knicks this season. If I took the regular season stock, then like I would have picked the Celtics to sweep the Knicks. Oh, wait, that's right. I did. I will just say this about Mathurin. I do think he is a weapon that should be accounted for when you're evaluating this series. He is another element to the Pacers that the Knicks didn't have to deal with last year. This is also a completely different Knicks team dealing with this Pacers team going into this season. So I get it if there is a frustration that Knicks fans have largely said, you beat us last year when we were missing all our guys. Now we're healthy. We got this. I would just say that, well, we were missing Benedict Mathurin doesn't personally stack up against, like, we didn't have Anunoby and Randall and
I just
Mitch.
think it's like, who's that? It's like
that if that's the frustration,
man,
I'm with you.
Yeah,
they should Google him. I get it.
Exactly.
I get it.
This man is a bucket and can score, and he will have, like, he loves these type of chippiness type of plays. Like, the man dropped 23 in a game against Cleveland, 19 in another one. Like, he's going to have some big games. I think they'll learn his name quickly, but this is no just like slouch on the Pacers. So.
You're clearly speaking about specific Knicks fans right now.
I've ran into,
you got a bad friend group.
Yeah, I got a lot. All my friends are Knicks fans, and there is just no respect being put on any of these players. It's like, hey, I remember the same thing happened with like TJ McConnell. McConnell was good last year.
Okay.
Playoffs, you know?
We're terrified. In Knicks Film School, we've talked a lot about, we hope Tyler Kolek becomes TJ McConnell in the future. So we have some respect on his name for sure.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of different variables from last year to this year. I think it's really hard to compare. I mean, they're just totally different teams. And you talk about the additions of Karl-Anthony Towns and, of course, Mikal Bridges. And we've seen Mikal Bridges kind of get the primary defensive assignment on Tyrese Haliburton throughout the regular season. I know it's not going to be just Mikal guarding him every single time. I'm sure it'll be kind of by a committee thing where you don't wear him out. But curious what you think is the most important thing to stop that the Pacers do to try to take away their strengths and make this more of a Knicks style of game.
If you can shut down their pace, shut down isn't the right word, because you're not going to shut down the Pacers' pace. That's how they've gotten this far. You're clearly going to have to play with them in that pace, but try to dictate terms in that way. You got to match up in transition. It's the number one thing for me. If you can get them in the half court, I know how successful they've been in the half court. I know what the numbers are from the Cavs series. My hope is that it's funny how the last two games the Knicks played were both my hope for how they could play against the Pacers and my fear for how they might play against the Pacers. Got cooked in transition. The majority of the game they played against the Celtics in Game 5 got run out of the building in Boston in the second half. The exact opposite happened in Game 6. They matched up. They were making shots, so it helped them set their defense quicker. And then every time the Celtics tried to run, they were picking up guys. The Celtics barely had a chance to get easy buckets. Any threes that they hit were found a way to be contested. You got to figure out a way to stop them in transition. If you take that element and just slow it down, you got a chance. And it's why coming into this series, the Pacers just create such a different challenge for the Knicks that they haven't really seen outside of when Jason Tatum went out in this playoffs. And it's Tibbs has his work cut out for him. This 7-man rotation has its work cut out for them. And I'm fascinated to see how they handle it.
Last year, I think one of the themes was whoever won the rebounding battle won the game. That's what happened through all 7 games in the series. So it was something to really keep an eye on. In the regular season, it was like that too. So I don't know what the common theme is going to be between these two teams, but is there something that, like, when the Knicks are doing this, they are pretty much at their best and unbeatable that maybe Indiana can look to really take away?
Well, so you did hit on it, that the Mitchell Robinson aspect of this, that they have that the Knicks have a guy now that can dominate on the boards like he has in the past, like he has largely throughout the playoffs. When you're adding to the possession battle, and this was an old identity of the Knicks. We talk about what they were last year to what they were this year. I don't have to tell you how dominant Isaiah Hartenstein was on the offensive glass, how they wore teams out by, we're going to make you play 24 full seconds of defense, and then we're going to get the rebound and make you play 14 more seconds. And when they're able to do that successfully, it's a Tibbs team, so they're going to crash the boards. It's why they went and got Josh Hart and have played him as much as it's why, like, Josh Hart speaks to the ethos of a Tom Thibodeau team that even my guard is going to be dominant on the boards. It wears out opposing defenses. So Yeah, if they can add a bunch of possessions to their ledger, it'll absolutely give them an advantage. And it's why I respect Carlisle for like largely the strategy for game 6 back in Indiana wasn't even like you need to box out better. It's like you don't even need to get the rebound. Just box out Isaiah Hartenstein. Like face guard him if you have to on every shot. And it completely neutralized Hartenstein throughout game 6. And then by game 7, the Knicks, I'm sorry, Michael, they were out of bodies. So now here's the olive branch I'll also extend to Indiana. They didn't miss. Like at a certain point, the Pacers didn't miss in game 7.
Historic.
Right. So when you're going up against that and you're out of people, like the Pacers did earn that series win. The Knicks also weren't able to combat anything the Pacers were doing by the end of the series.
Well, let's just be honest here. If Haliburton gets hurt in game 1 and then Siakam goes down in game 4 and the Knicks win the series in 6, do you think Knicks fans are going to be crying about going to the NBA championship? I don't think so. So they're not going to be like, oh, we beat a Pacers team that was hurt. Oh man, shucks. It's not really a will. No, it's as big of a series win whether they're fully healthy or they're not. It's just the fact you still have to win, and these are still NBA players, and I think people forget that because Alec Burks, DiVincenzo, they were killers against the Pacers last year. The Pacers had no answer for him, so I'll just put that out there. But
hold on, you look at Alec Burks as a killer.
What against the Pacers? He couldn't miss.
He was good.
He hit a bunch of shots in game 5. I do remember that.
I feel like every time he was on the court, he didn't miss.
He scored 20 or more in the final 2 games of that series. It was
and then game 7, So game 7, by the time Jaylen Brunson had broke his hand, I was like, all right, we're gonna lose.
I'm just saying, this is a guy that was not even a thought in the rotation, then comes in and drops 20 in that game 4 when the Pacers, I think.
I got it right here. 26 points in game 7. He had 18 in game 5. 20 in game 3. I mean, this guy, he averaged 15 in the series, and he went from game 1, he played 1 minute, scored 0. So he was on.
I'm here for an Alec Burks is an NBA hooper conversation. Game 7, they were down 25 the majority of that second half when Alec Burks was given the green light. And look, the game 3, if I'm remembering right, was very much a oh wow, you're productive type of thing, and he played until they stopped picking on him defensively. Game 5, my goodness, everybody was hitting that night, so it was good to. I'm with you. The Alec Burks thing existed, and they were able to get contributions from their 11th man later on in the series.
I got PTSD.
But I'd rather have OG Anunoby or Alec Burks playing. Is my question.
Sure. I don't know. It's a toss up, right? And
gotcha.
I'm kidding, obviously, but I do want to bring up Towns because you brought him up earlier, and I think he's such a fascinating wrinkle to this Knicks team now that they didn't have last year. Obviously, Hartenstein, totally different big, but was able to do a lot of good things. Towns, I mean, the guy put up 40 against the Pacers. Now, look, Turner didn't play in that game. Thomas Bryant was getting cooked by him for the majority of that. I was just kind of laughing. I'm like, are they not going to try to ever put Siakam on him? Are they not going to do it? And the Pacers refused to do it. So I just think with Towns, you look at that game 5 against Boston, he had some really stupid fouls, and he seems like he kind of gets frustrated sometimes when things aren't going his way, can be a bit of a headache. Do you think this is a type of series that could really make Karl-Anthony Towns commit some of these dumb fouls where he just gets frustrated because he's not getting calls or things aren't going the way he wants? And I think, is there an element where the Pacers kind of play that mental game with him a little bit?
Brother, if it's a day that ends in Y and the Knicks have a game, it's a moment for Karl-Anthony Towns to commit some stupid fouls and take himself out of a game. It's another element of this series that I think is important because especially if the Pacers aren't going to put a wing on him and he's going to be matched up against the center. Look, this is no disrespect to Miles Turner. He's cooked every center that there's matched up against him this year. Rudy Gobert, Defensive Player of the Year, cooked him in the game that he played against Gobert this year. In the 2 games that podcast host Draymond Green went up against him, he cooked him. Oh well, that's right. He missed the first one and got accused of ducking smoke, and then he went for 31 and 17 against Draymond the next time that he played him. Anytime he's matched up against the center, he's largely been effective. And then there's the defensive side of the ball, where if you put him in pick and roll, he's been fine if he's forced to be physical. When he was matched up against Tatum, that was fine. But if you put him in space or you put him in rotation, he's just going to resort back to drop coverage or commit some of these hip check fouls that suddenly he's got 3 fouls 2 minutes into the second quarter. And that takes away one of your best offensive pieces. So it's a yin and yang with him. Like at one stretch of the game, it's my goodness, this is God's gift to the center position. I'm so glad we have Karl-Anthony Towns. 2 whistles later, oh my goodness, this is why teams have been so frustrated. That like the Timberwolves were so frustrated with him that they had to go get reinforcements, and we're so lucky to get Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert. And I worry about that with the Pacers going mismatch hunting, especially in the pick and roll. It is a thing that in Knicks land, when we've started to break down the film and look at how they can take advantage of this Knicks team on defense, it's not as much Brunson, although I'm sure that they will go after him too in this series. The Towns aspect of this is also a fascinating one. Now, look, I am very intrigued to see how Rick Carlisle guards him in this series, how they strategize, and if they'll put a center on him or if they'll put a wing or a forward, because that will turn Cat back into the offensive weapon he largely hasn't been this postseason. But yeah, it is on my mind. It's in front of mind, to be honest. So we'll see.
We mentioned earlier that the Knicks made a lot of big moves, big trades, all that. Usually it takes time to develop the chemistry. We know this Knicks team, for the most part, should be together for years to come. Bridges, due to re-up his contract soon. We know Brunson's going to be there. OG got the deal, all that stuff. How do you feel like, how would you rate the Knicks chemistry right now compared to, maybe where it could be in the future?
It honestly changes from game to game, Michael. Like, they looked like the most unified force in game 6 against the Celtics, right? Game 4 against the Celtics. They came out in that second half and ran him off the floor, went 30 for 45 from the field. The rotation, the like defensively, they're on a thread. And then there's game 5 where they don't look like they've played together at all this season. And a lot of what's been made this year is the defensive miscommunications and the difficulty of trying to get them all to play under Tibbs, a defensive philosophy that hopefully works a certain way. It could be anywhere from an A- to a C+, and sometimes even the extremes of an A+ to an F-. Like it's honestly been inconsistent throughout the year, which is why I'm very curious which version of the team we see against the Pacers team, where I would grade their chemistry as a 10 out of 10 going into the series.
That's our strength. And one thing I just want to throw out there is a Tyrese Haliburton Pacers team has not lost back-to-back games since early February.
Really?
That's how good this team has been. The last time they lost back-to-back games where Tyrese played was against the New York Knicks and the Los Angeles Lakers, February 8th and February 11th. That's how good this group has been, that they've been healthy. They have chemistry. They're playing defense. I know like last year that was a knock. Pacers, oh my God, they don't play defense. Since January, right around 7th best defensive team in the NBA. So they're balanced. They have the chemistry. But obviously, hey, you guys have those maybe more stars, I would say. More guys that could get you 20, like your Karl-Anthony Towns or your Jaylen Brunsons, those guys that could be on an all-NBA, first or second team type players.
I will say that Miles Turner was not playing in those games either, Facci, that you're talking about.
I mean, look, so that makes it even more interesting.
Just saying they weren't fully healthy, which we know all about those excuses with not being fully healthy and how that matters.
No, yeah, hey, look, some of that happens, but I knew at least for Haliburton, I know he didn't play when we had that rough stretch of 3 straight losses against like two with
Chicago and the Hawks twice. Yeah, that was a rough stretch.
Throw that out the window, but like that's interesting to hear that. When was the last time they lost back-to-back games with their starting 5? I mean, we're talking.
They've been really good since Nesmith has been back healthy. I mean, that's just been the difference. Getting Nesmith back and even Nembhard back in December was really a difference maker. And Mathurin was able to kind of become less of an important piece, and Nembhard kind of take that role. So there's a lot more avenues we can go down. I know we got to wrap this up here, but I am curious. You brought it up. Predictions. Getting to that. I'm sure me and Facci will already have given our predictions on a podcast that will come out before this. But who do you have winning this series, and in how many games?
So I want to be clear. I'm more predicting 7 than I am Knicks in 7. I think this is a 7-game series. I'm confident in the Knicks' ability to win 3 games in the series. It would not shock me if the Pacers won the series. I'm out on the record with that. I have everything you just mentioned about how good the Pacers have been when fully healthy. This is a team and a fan base that should go into this series just as confident as a Knicks team that just dethroned the defending champs, right? I think there's a Jaylen Brunson factor that I trust the most of anything in this series, that if this game is close, he will find a way to win the game. I think the fact that the Knicks end up with home court does help them. I'm not going to say the Pacers can't win a game 7 in Madison Square Garden a year removed from them doing it. I'll pick Knicks in 7, but I'm mostly just preparing myself for a 7-game series than anything else. Like you don't hear the New York arrogance in Knicks in 7,
no,
right? It's very much like, I respect the Pacers. They're a very good team. What happened against the Celtics, like the Knicks won that series. I'm not letting anybody diminish that, but this is a different team with different challenges that present the Knicks, and I'm thinking they can win the series. It would probably have to go the distance if they do.
Hey, it's going to be really interesting. Early on, I tweeted out, I said Pacers in 6. And after then I went, oh man, what do I do now? I'm stuck with that prediction. So I got to stay with it. But when you said, look, this does have the makings of a potential 7-game series because the teams are that good. You talked about how if this game gets down late, Jaylen Brunson's clutch. He is. I know another guy who's real clutch, and they said he's 10 of 11 on game tying and go-ahead shots this year in the final 2 minutes. That's Tyrese Haliburton. That man is clutch. He has a highlight reel of game winners just from last year to this year. He's got 2 game winners this postseason. So if it comes down in the end, hey, he ain't the only one who's clutching in terms of Jaylen Brunson. So we'll see. I'm going to stick with my prediction of Pacers in 6. But, hey, I wouldn't mind if we have to win it in 7.
I'm glad you don't mind either way.
I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't hate it. Wouldn't be the worst.
Yeah, if it goes 7 games, I think I would lean New York, only because it'd be shocking to me to see Indiana win twice, back-to-back years in a game 7 in the Garden. I don't know if they can do that. Would I pick the Pacers in a game 7 if they got to that point? I'm gonna pick Pacers in 6 like Facci with my prediction. So I think I would maybe I know they've done it before, so why can't they do it again? And I feel like all the pressure would be on New York, right? I think that's the big thing too, just the amount of anxiousness in the arena. And if the Pacers can get hot again like they did last year, why couldn't they repeat it? I just feel like it's very unlikely to happen again. So I have the Pacers winning in 6, but to me, it's very nerve-wracking just because I respect this Knicks team a lot. And people were asking me, who would you rather play, a healthy Knicks team or the Celtics without Tatum? And I'm like, are you kidding me? The Celtics without Tatum. Yeah. The Pacers, they play the same style, and they're just not as good. And obviously you find out that Jaylen Brown had a torn meniscus. They couldn't only do so much. They had one fluky win because they were playing for Tatum or whatever in game 5, but the Knicks are a much better team than the Celtics without Tatum. I just thought that was a little bit disrespectful, but I think that I'm picking 6, and it's not because I don't think they can win a game 7. Very unlikely to me that Indiana would win game 7 against New York if it got to that point.
Who asked you that? Would you rather pay a Knicks team?
It was more so a radio conversation here.
Okay, it's a hypothetical.
So
would you rather play? Okay.
Who you rooting for in game 6 tonight? I kind of want the Knicks to get it done just because I think, or I hope it goes to 7, but the Knicks still win because I think they do a better
you're rooting
matchup.
For 100 overtimes. I get that.
Yeah.
I
was rooting for injuries. I'm not going to lie. Hey, can someone tear an ACL while we're playing?
We're honest.
Let's get the Knicks hurt.
One person did tear his Achilles. You're halfway there. Just the wrong team.
Wrong
team advanced, unfortunately. So,
yeah.
It should be no surprise to anybody that 2 Pacers content creators and a Knicks content creator all pick their teams to win the series. I do think this is as close to a coin toss that you can get from my perspective, at least.
I feel the same way. Did you pick the Celtics in the last series?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I picked the Cavs. I picked the Pacers in 7.
I said Cavs in 7, and people are like, how dare you? How could you? And it's I don't know, the 64-win Cleveland team, felt like they looked pretty good, but obviously, look, the Pacers played to the best of their ability. Cleveland did have some injuries. I think Indiana took advantage of those, and the Pacers just surprised even myself. They were playing great basketball, and in all my time as a fan, this is the closest I feel that we can win a championship. There's something different about this group. Last year, I've said it before on the show, last year against Boston Conference Finals, just happy to be there. Just happy to be there. You win one game, hey, that's awesome. Whatever. I feel like this is different. For Indiana to be able to win in 6 or 7, I don't care what it takes. I don't care if it takes 50 overtimes in game 7. If you win, that's unbelievable. So both franchises deserve this moment. I know that there's going to be Pacer fans who say, I hate the Knicks and big market. Hey, Knicks have been starved for a long time. I don't want to see Boston do it again or any other team like that. So, hey, Andrew, good luck in the series. Not too much luck. Because I'm gonna be honest, we need.
I'm not wishing you luck.
I was gonna say, I'm impressed you wished me any luck. I hope you
Look,
guys.
When he said
I hope
good
you guys
luck
have
tonight in Game 6, I said, "Why are you texting him that? That's ridiculous." I'm not.
I
wishing
hope
the Knicks
you
luck.
guys have a miserable time in
Yes,
this
thank
series.
you. Let's be
I hope
real.
this is
You
a
know what?
terrible
I
series
take
for you
it
guys.
back. I
There you
take
go.
it back. So hey, I'm not gonna wish you any injuries. Just don't win the series. All right. And you know what? I'm confident it's not the last time we've seen you. It's a pleasure having you back on. I look forward to the next time.
Thanks, absolutely. I hope you guys have wonderful content throughout the playoffs,
Yes.
which I don't doubt will happen
too.
as you watch the Knicks advance to the NBA Finals.
Fair
All right, you
enough.
can find all of his work over at Knicks Film School, and it's a great podcast. I always enjoy the breakdown, and it's good to just kind of get a different perspective besides just your team perspective. So part of our Blue Wire podcast, Filmy, so make sure you guys check them out. And yeah, we'll be doing it again soon. So Pacer Nation, we will talk to y'all later.